Welcome to This Day in His Story, created by American Heritage Worldwide. A reminder that every day holds something new to learn. Did you know John F. Kennedy swam more than 3.5 miles through the ocean while helping injured members of his crew when his patrol torpedo boat, PT-109, exploded after being rammed by the Japanese in the Solomon Islands? Learn how Kennedy courageously swam through dangerous seas to rescue injured sailors and even towed one crew member with a life jacket strap held in his teeth. Learn that Kennedy's bravery earned him the Navy and Marine Corps Medal and a Purple Heart. Discover that years after the war, Kennedy wrote a letter to the commander of the Japanese ship that sank the PT-109, and the two former enemies became friends.
I want you to picture something for me for a second. You are sitting on a small wooden boat, and you're in the middle of the Pacific Ocean.
Right?
And it is 1943. It's this hot, late summer night. And when I say it's a moonless night, I mean it is a suffocating, pitch-black darkness.
Yeah, the kind where you literally can't see your own hand in front of your face.
Exactly. You're just sitting there. The engine is barely idling. And, you know, as a matter of absolute historical fact, that an enemy fleet is out there somewhere. Like they are slicing through that exact same patch of water.
It is basically the ultimate sensory deprivation chamber, right? But with lethal stakes. I mean, the psychological weight of that darkness is just profound because your primary survival tool, your vision, is completely stripped away.
They're completely blind.
Completely. You are relying entirely on the sound of water slapping the hull, and you're waiting for a threat that you know for a fact is coming, but you simply cannot see it.
And then, you know, the absolute worst case scenario actually becomes reality. Out of that void, this massive steel ship bursts from the darkness without any warning at all and physically cleaves your tiny patrol boat completely in two.
Yeah, it's brutal.
It is. And that collision, it wasn't just a military disaster. It was actually the crucible that forged a future world leader. So today we are doing a deep dive into the factual, absolutely harrowing survival story of Lieutenant John F. Kennedy and the crew of the PT-109.
It's an incredible piece of history.
It really is. We're going to explore what a single night of just pure chaos in the Solomon Islands teaches us about, you know, the mechanics of survival, the devastating burden of leadership, and the proactive courage it takes to face your darkest moments.
Yeah, and to really understand how everything goes so violently wrong, we have to look at the tactical board on August 2, 1943.
Right.
So we are in the Blackett Strait. Kennedy's patrol torpedo boat, which is the PT-109, was part of this coordinated 15-boat picket line. And their objective was to intercept a fleet of Japanese naval ships that were known as the Tokyo Express.
Which, I want to focus on that objective for a second, because the Tokyo Express wasn't just, you know, a handful of ships. This was the vital supply chain that was keeping the Japanese war machine running in the southern Pacific Islands.
Yeah, absolutely crucial.
They were moving soldiers, weapons, provisions constantly, so breaking that supply line was critical.
Crucial to the entire Pacific theater, honestly. So earlier on August 1st, Lieutenant Kennedy positioned his boat alongside two others, the PT-162 and the PT-169, to create a sort of trap across the strait. They were essentially lying in wait.
Okay, let's unpack this stakeout.
Yeah.
Because the mechanics of it seem utterly terrifying to me.
Oh, yeah.
It's 2:3 in the morning. You're idling in the dark to maintain stealth. And then a shape just materializes. I mean, there were no sirens, right? No early warning systems. A massive silhouette just looms right over them. And it turns out to be the Japanese destroyer, the Amajiri.
The physical disparity here it's staggering. I mean, the Amajiri was a 2,000-ton steel destroyer.
Wow.
And it was traveling at high speed. It was 4 times the length of Kennedy's PT-109, which, let's be honest, was essentially a heavily armed wooden speedboat.
Right. I'm trying to visualize that impact for everyone listening, because it's not just like a big car hitting a small car. It's more like a speeding semi-truck plowing into a golf cart that's just sitting on the road.
That is a very accurate analogy, yeah.
The destroyer rams the starboard to the right rear side of Kennedy's boat. The impact immediately shears the boat in half and explodes the high-octane aviation fuel lines. Instantly, you have men burning in the water, and they're utterly surrounded by enemy-controlled islands. But I have to admit, I have some confusion here.
Okay, what is it?
Well, the PT-109 was sent there to stop the Tokyo Express. How is a small, idling wooden boat supposed to fight a 2,000-ton destroyer in the first place.
Right, I get why that seems crazy. But it comes down to the doctrine of patrol torpedo boats at the time. PT boats relied entirely on speed and stealth. The strategy was basically to use the darkness to creep in really close, fire their torpedoes, which, carry massive explosive payloads that can sink large ships.
Okay.
And then they'd use their speed to escape before the enemy could bring their heavy guns to bear.
But to do that, you need time and distance to line up a shot, right?
Precisely. And you need momentum. Kennedy did actually attempt to turn his boat around to shoot his torpedoes when the destroyer appeared. But marine engines don't work like sports cars.
They don't just rev and go.
Exactly. When a boat is idling in neutral, you have to engage the gears and build up torque against the resistance of the water. There simply was not enough time to overcome the inertia of the boat. The Amajiri was moving way too fast, and the darkness hit it until it was literally right on top of them.
Which forces this immediate violent shift in the reality of the crew. Like, 1 second you are executing a calculated military ambush, and the next your ship is literally gone.
Yeah.
The ocean is on fire, and you are thrown into a fight for raw, biological survival. And this brings us to a detail that I think shows how seemingly unrelated background skills can suddenly become the absolute only thing keeping people alive.
Oh, you're talking about Kennedy's background as a swimmer.
Yes. So we have this crew violently thrown into the Pacific. Some of them are severely injured. Some of them can't swim at all. Kennedy, however, had been on the varsity swim team at Harvard University.
Which is incredibly fortunate.
Beyond fortunate. He realizes his men are drowning, so he swims out into the boiling water to strap them to life vests. But for one of the men who is badly burned, a life vest just isn't enough. Kennedy has to physically tow him to safety. And he does this by clamping the strap of the man's life vest between his teeth.
The biomechanics of that are just brutal. Think about the strain on the human body.
That's exactly what I keep getting stuck on. Like, imagine holding a thick canvas strap in your teeth, like a dog with a toy. Now imagine trying to swim 3.5 miles through ocean currents while doing it.
It's almost unbelievable.
The sheer physical toll of dragging 150-plus pounds of dead weight through the water using only your jaw and neck muscles. I mean, how does the human body not just shut down entirely? You're restricting your own airway, you're inevitably swallowing salt water, and you're doing it in the pitch dark after surviving a literal explosion.
It really highlights the extreme outer limits of human endurance when you are fueled by just pure adrenaline and absolute necessity. But what's crucial to understand here is that it wasn't a solo endeavor.
Right.
While Kennedy was towing that injured man, the rest of the surviving crew was engaged in their own agonizing tug of war against the ocean. 2 men were lashed to a piece of debris, basically a wooden plank from the wreckage, and the other 7 surviving men spent those entire 3.5 miles continuously pushing and pulling that plank through the dark water.
It's a collective, grueling marathon. Because for an average swimmer, a 3-mile swim in a calm, well-lit pool takes hours and leaves you completely depleted. Doing it under these conditions, it's not even a swim. It's a slow-motion battle against the sea.
And when they finally reached land, which was this uninhabited patch of sand called Plum Pudding Island, they essentially just collapsed.
Yeah.
But the reality of their situation hadn't actually improved much.
No.
They were out of the water, sure, but they were stranded. No food, no fresh water, and no radio. They were entirely isolated deep inside a theater of war.
Which makes Kennedy's next decision almost unfathomable. You would think after dragging a man with your teeth for 3.5 miles, your survival instinct would anchor you to dry land forever.
Right.
But Kennedy actually goes back out into the ocean.
He does, because there were still men missing from the initial collision. He waded back into the sea, treading water for an hour at a time in the dark, trying to spot any sign of his crew. He would search, rest briefly, pick a new direction, and go out again.
It's just staggering. And it doesn't stop there. A couple of days later, by August 4th, the crew has moved to a neighboring island looking for resources, swimming again with that same wooden plank. Kennedy even takes a salvaged 2-man canoe out into the ocean to search for help, only for it to be completely swamped and battered by heavy waves.
Yeah.
He is constantly throwing himself against the absolute physical limits of the environment.
But sheer physical effort doesn't solve the core problem, which is communication. They needed to signal the Allied forces. Yeah. And that leads to one of the most resourceful, improvisational moments of the entire war.
The coconut.
Yes, exactly.
It's August 6th, so 4 days after the collision. Kennedy crosses paths with 2 native men who are operating as scouts for the Allies. And since he has no paper, no radio, no flare gun, he uses what he has. He finds the smooth husk of a green coconut and he literally carves a message into it.
It's a masterpiece of constrained communication, really. Every letter took intense effort to scratch into that husk, so the message had to be incredibly efficient.
I want to read the exact text he carved, because you can just feel the desperation, but also the military precision in it. It reads, "Narrow ISL-Commander-Native knows Posit- he can pilot-11 alive-needs small boat-Kennedy."
It operates perfectly like a telegraph. It establishes their location, confirms there are 11 survivors, states exactly what is needed, a small boat, and most importantly, it validates the messengers. Native knows position, he can pilot. He is telling the Allied command, trust the men holding this coconut.
But that validation is where I think the real story lies. We focus so much on the novelty of the coconut, but realistically, a piece of fruit doesn't just magically float into an Allied naval base.
Right.
How does that scratched-up piece of fruit actually navigate through an active war zone that is heavily patrolled by Japanese warships?
It relies entirely on the brilliance and the bravery of those two native Allied scouts. These men were part of a network of coast watchers. They possessed a deep, localized knowledge of the waters and the islands that the American and Japanese forces simply didn't have. They had to paddle through enemy-infested territory, risking torture or execution if they were caught, just to deliver that makeshift SOS.
They were the actual lifeline. And we know the name of one of the other key islanders involved, Ironi Kumana. The very next day, he and a group of islanders brought food and instructions from a New Zealand reconnaissance officer. Kumana even built a fire for Kennedy's freezing, exhausted men by rubbing two sticks together.
That's amazing.
It really strips away the myth of the isolated American hero. It shows how survival was a deeply collaborative effort relying on local intelligence.
Absolutely. The coconut is just debris without the scouts who carried it. Their success meant that on August 7th, rescue boats finally made contact, and by the early morning of August 8th, the 11 survivors arrived safely at the U.S. naval base at Rendova.
But surviving the physical ordeal is only half the story, right? The ocean might have been behind them, but the psychological and physical damage was already done. The true toll of this event goes so much deeper than the timeline of the rescue.
We have to look at the final accounting. 11 men came back, but 2 crew members were killed in that initial collision in the dark.
And you could hear the crushing weight of those 2 lost lives in Kennedy's own words afterward. When people talked about how fortunate the survival story was, he said, and I quote, "I would agree with you that it was lucky the whole thing happened if the 2 fellows had not been killed. That rather spoils the whole thing for me."
Spoils the whole thing. It's an incredibly subdued phrase, but it reveals the harsh internal ledger of leadership.
Exactly. The public sees the medals. Kennedy was awarded the Navy and Marine Corps Medal for his heroism in the water. He received a Purple Heart. He was widely celebrated. But internally, a true leader views a victory with casualties as a personal failure. The medals don't bring back the men who died on your watch.
And that emotional burden was compounded by immense physical destruction. Over the final months of his combat service, Kennedy's weight plummeted from 165 pounds down to just 140 pounds. Furthermore, the violent impact of the destroyer slamming into his boat caused a severe spinal injury that would plague him with chronic, debilitating pain for the rest of his life.
And yet, despite the shattered back, despite the rapid weight loss, and despite illnesses that required him to be hospitalized, he didn't just pack up and go home.
No, he didn't.
He remained in the Navy, taking command of another boat, the PT-109, in the Solomon Islands, until August 1944.
It demonstrates a resilience that goes beyond mere survival. I mean, he was physically broken and carrying the intense guilt of outliving his men, but he actively chose to return to the very theater of war that had nearly destroyed him.
So we've seen the physical courage it takes to drag a man through a burning ocean and the resilience to keep fighting. But there's a final chapter to this story years later that reveals a completely different and perhaps much rarer type of courage, the courage of reconciliation.
Yes. Fast forward almost a full decade. It is September 1952. Kennedy has transitioned from the military into politics. He is a congressman representing Massachusetts.
And he decides to track someone down, a man named Kohei Hanami. For those following the tactical details, that name is crucial. Hanami was the commander of the Japanese destroyer Amajiri.
The exact man.
Yes, the exact man who gave the orders on the ship that sliced Kennedy's boat in two, killed 2 of his friends, and ruined his back forever.
Kennedy finds him, and he writes him a letter. But he doesn't write to demand an apology or, express lingering resentment. He writes to offer his best wishes, proposing that they exchange friendly greetings and foster goodwill between their nations.
I want you to really think about the psychology required to do that. Think about trying to mend fences with someone who deeply wronged you, like a bitter rival at work or someone who caused you severe emotional pain. The ego fights back against doing that.
Oh, absolutely.
Now, scale that up by 1,000. Reaching out to the man who literally blew up your ship and succeeded in killing your team, why would a leader willingly open old wounds to do that?
Because physical courage and moral courage operate on completely different timelines. Physical courage, like swimming into the fire, is reactive. Instinct and adrenaline basically take the wheel. But moral courage, writing that letter, is proactive.
It's intentional.
Very. It's a deliberate, premeditated choice made in the cold light of day. Kennedy had to consciously decide to look past his own lifelong physical pain and his survivor's guilt to see the humanity in the man on the other side of the steering wheel. Reaching out to a former enemy is often a vital mechanism for a leader to heal themselves, to close the psychological loop of the war.
And the incredible part is, Hanami responded in kind. These two former mortal enemies, who met by violently crashing into each other in the pitch black, actually became friends. It proves that the trauma of conflict doesn't have to dictate the terms of your future.
It's a profound testament to the idea that true leadership isn't just about how you maneuver through the battle. It's about how you manage the peace that follows.
Let's take a look at the whole picture here. We started with a terrifying collision in the dark. We saw a Harvard swimmer using his teeth to drag a man 3.5 miles. We saw the brilliance of native scouts carrying a message carved into a coconut. We explored the crushing hidden toll of leadership. And finally, the grace of befriending the enemy who put you through it all.
There is a quote often referenced regarding this story from President Thomas S. Monson, who's cited the biblical verse Joshua 1.9. It reads, "Be strong and of a good courage, be not afraid, neither be thou dismayed, for the Lord thy God is with thee whithersoever thou goest."
It's a perfect lens for everything we've unpacked on this deep dive, and it brings this history directly to you listening right now. What does courage actually mean to you? Do you think Kennedy's true courage was in the water continually searching the dark for his men, or was it in the restraint of that 1952 letter?
It's a tough question.
And most critically, if you were thrown into that dark, warning ocean, would you have been willing to swim back into the fire for someone else?
We all want to believe we'd be the hero, holding the life vest strap in our teeth. But history reminds us that crossing that threshold from self-preservation to self-sacrifice is exceptionally rare.
It is. And I want to leave you with one final fascinating detail to ponder. A detail that bridges that terrifying night in 1943 with the absolute peak of global power. That green coconut husk with the scratched SOS, it wasn't thrown away.
No, it wasn't.
It was preserved, encased in plastic, and turned into a paperweight. And that piece of tropical debris sat right on John F. Kennedy's desk in the Oval Office while he served as the 35th President of the United States from 1961 until 1963.
A daily, tactile reminder of his darkest hour, sitting right in the center of the free world.
But here is the historical symmetry that I find absolutely incredible. Right in the middle of JFK's presidency in 1962, Kohei Hanami, the Japanese commander who sank him, was also elected to a leadership role. He became the mayor of Shiokawa, Japan.
They both survived the destruction to become leaders of their people at the exact same time.
I want you to really mull over that parallel.
Yeah.
Two men violently collided in the pitch dark. They nearly destroyed one another. Yet both of them ended up rising to lead their respective communities almost 20 years later. They transformed from mortal enemies trying to sink each other in a strait into political peers and genuine friends. So with seemingly disastrous collisions in our own life, the moments where we feel completely broken in two and left in the dark might actually be the agonizing, necessary first steps toward profound, unexpected alliances decades down the road.
Thank you for joining us for this day in his story. May the lessons of yesterday inspire you to see God's hand today and to play your part in his story now. For more faith-based learning, visit ahsworldwide.org, the homeschool for faith and family.